So, hey guys, as someone doing powerlifting, bodybuilding in a home gym, what's the first good stepping stone to be able to do only lifts in the future that I can incorporate into a general program from home? Is there any sort of mobility checklist that I need to reach first, like a full depth overhead squat, for example?
So the first thing, if you want to start doing Olympic lifts, is to start doing the lifts. So I assume if you're doing like powerlifting stroke or like power building at home, you probably have an Olympic bar. I would start like moving that Olympic bar around in a movement that looks like a snatch and a movement that looks like a clean and jerk. You're going to start noticing things immediately. So more than likely you'll have like tightness in the overhead position and tightness in the front rack position. I would start incorporating in like snatches and clean and jerks with an empty barbell into my like the middle of my session somewhere. So when I'm like well warmed up but I'm not like completely pumped, so maybe after you do squats or something like that, move a barbell around for 15 minutes. When you've started doing those movements and you start seeing where you have deficits, right, I'm immediately going to say you'll probably have those two deficits anyway, and you might have deficits around the hips, the ankles, areas where you'll feel tight. When you start seeing those deficits, start using the resources that are online, like a plethora of resources around getting into better overhead positions, getting into better pulling positions. Go to like somebody like Aaron from Squat University, look up any of the old Kelly Starrett stuff, start opening your hips up, opening your ankles up and moving better. And then I think once you've been able to achieve the positions and you're moving a barbell around relatively well, then you can start looking for some sort of like technical cueing.
So, firstly, you would have full depth overhead squats with the barbell overhead with a wide grip, so at least outside the rings. So, practice that as much as possible without shoes, preferably to get a reasonable level of mobility addressed. You'll kind of see those areas that Fitz mentioned that might be tight. Then get yourself a pair of weightlifting shoes and then start training with those weightlifting shoes. So any kind of the cheapest weightlifting shoes you can get, start training with those, start moving around like Fitz said. Start doing your mobility in those, so your overhead squats, start doing some high bar lifts. So very, very empty or very light overhead squats. So literally like 20, 30, 40 kilos. Just practice these as much as possible, as frequently as possible. Because realistically, you're not going to be able to load them very aggressively, but it will be very useful for you to get used to that position. So one of the biggest things weightlifters or powerlifters moving to weightlifting have an issue with is not only is the technique incredibly hard, but you know that, so you'll get to that, but as the positions feel very, very uncomfortable. So it's so vastly different to what you would have been doing when you're powerlifting. There's such brand new positions that the more time you spend now getting used to those positions and seeing what they feel like, and the more your body gets used to it, the sooner you can get over those kind of initial learning curve, that initial steep learning curve for not knowing what those feel like and getting your body used to it. So a lot of overhead squats, very, very empty, frequently. Every time you do squats, before or after, just some overhead squats. Second thing then, next thing will probably most uncomfortable will be a front rack position. So having a bar on your front rack in the front squat position and then holding a barbell overhead in this jerk grip position from the front. So a lot of times powerlifters will do something akin to a push press, strict press, where the bar will be starting somewhere around chin level. They'll have a little staggered stance for some reason, and then the bar will reach approximately 90 degrees of elbow flexion, and they'll call it a strict press. So you want to get used to holding a barbell overhead in the jerk grip and having a barbell on the front rack. Then finally, I know we talk about the erroneous use of plyometrics too early, but one final thing I would start doing if you're training at home, if you're a powerlifter, bodybuilder, and you're somewhat strong, is just some unweighted, low intensity squat jumps. So just literally standing when you're warmed up on a separate session, literally just standing up, landing in a squat, straight into a jump, landing into a full depth squat. So just get used to the idea of raising your body up in the air and then getting down into a full squat. So very, very light, absolutely no weight, not maximal intensity like you would be normally doing plyometrics. I know that sounds kind of radically against other things we've talked about, but you're coming from a different scenario here and it's not going to kill your speed strength. So literally jumping up and down, preferably in your weightlifting shoes, literally just learning what it feels like to jump up in the air and then land in a full depth squat. This will pay dividends if you do those couple of things when you start finally doing something Olympic lifts.